Hello, everyone, and welcome to those that are listening to our live stream to Fireside Chat number 39. So, as usual, we pick a topic and we start discussing like we used to do when we were together and having a drink. But before I introduce our topic, the usual, if you like, hit like, that lets us know as well, keeps us motivated, and please join the live session. It actually really helps with the discussion. It makes it much richer and much more nuanced when you add your comments and your thoughts to it, and it helps us explore many other avenues we may not have done. So please join us whenever you can, and also subscribe, and whenever there's a new fireside chat, then you'll be notified, so then you can listen. And have it not only on YouTube, but we also have a podcast related to that as well. So you can listen to it while you're doing your washing up, right? So without further ado, today's topic is around the all these different roles that we find in the software development team, right? I know at some point I had the thought that we don't need so many roles. Just get a bunch of software developers together and we'll create great software. All the way to the like umpteen different roles, and some of them I don't can't even remember. So are these roles necessary? Well, and are they good? Are they effective? How many of them are good? How many of them are not so good? All that is up for debate today. But before we go into that, what are these different roles? Let's enumerate a few of them, and just to kind of jog our memory on the roles that we are talking about in a software development team. So, who wants to go first?
Jose, you go first. You can be very creative with all the different roles that we have in.
uh, no, I mean, let's let's group them a little bit, right? Like for me, you kind of have specialists. Like you would have on the technical side, right? Like you would have DBA, or a data engineer, or machine learning expert, that kind of stuff. No, you have software developers. Yeah, senior, junior, any flavor you want there. No, then you have stuff on the process side, like agile coaches, engineering manager, if you will. No, that kind of stuff. You have Scrum Master as well. Is another one that is very popular as well. On the product side, you have product owner, product manager, product. I don't know. Like you have all sorts of things in there. Um, yeah, so quality, QA, tester, yeah, all sorts of stuff. You have on the platform side, again, you have SREs, you have operation support. I don't know. The list goes on. Of course, we have the architect. We've already dedicated an entire episode
You have the
to the
team lead. You
architect.
have the team lead. You
You
have the
have the team
technical
lead,
lead.
which also got a which also got an episode on its
You
own.
may even have a tech authority.
Tech authority. I've never heard tech that term. Let's
You
say.
get to large organizations, you have a lot of authorities in there.
Yeah.
But project manager, that kind of stuff, right? Like you have really a bunch of, and if you start doing cross-functional teams, like involving marketing, etc., right? Like you may have growth hackers, or you may have that kind of, so no, SEOs, or you have UX, etc., right? So it's really very varied in the naming, no, because this is another thing. What you're calling one thing in one organization may not be the same in another organization, especially for the more you know generic roles, right? Like the ones that are not software developer. Oh, I build software. What does an engineering manager do in this company? that may vary a lot, no, depending on what company it is.
So yeah, so we have all those different roles, yeah. So and I've seen a lot of developers saying like, why do we need all those roles? Or it's very common in projects, as you said, Mesh. A bunch of devs say, hey, like, why don't we just get the user in front of us and we build the whole thing ourselves and stuff? And it,
And then it
I
sucks.
understand saying that.
Actually, Mohammed Sufyan has just pointed out that he's talking about a software project that was built for health project, but for doctors by engineers, and they were sitting in the same room, and they got it done really well. We'll have to verify that case study,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
yes, it
But they
worked.
were not building it on their own. Yeah, they have someone there to try it out. Yeah.
Yeah, so but
Yes,
the sentiment, of course, that we just need to be careful, like to take like a few examples and transform them into rules, right? So, sorry, a few, yeah, uh,
trans.
exceptions and make it as a rule. So on one hand, I understand the sentiment. As developers, they say, look, we don't want all those people doing stuff and just making things more complicated and putting a lot of process because the more roles you have, the more alignment you need and stuff. But then there is another side. I want to tackle this point first, the developer's perspective. While it's true that a lot of developers will think like we don't need all those roles, we can do that everything ourselves. I've seen many times developers complaining, I don't want to do business analysis. This is not a developer's job. I want to write code. I'm unhappy in this project because I don't write a lot of code. Because I'm doing analysis, I'm working on the backlog, I'm discussing with the business, I'm trying to organize the backlog, I need to provide reports, I need to think about the costs, I need to, and I just want to write code. And this is a problem because like while the core skills of a developer is to write code, that's what gives them pleasure to do the work. A lot of the work in a project, there is a lot of work in a project that is not writing code, and this work needs to be done by someone, right? And then we can discuss, should the same person wear multiple hats, or should we have one person per hat? So, because that is also a thing that needs to be discussed. If you don't want all those roles, like, oh, are we talking about people doing roles? So, for example, every time we say a product owner, are we talking about a person, or you're talking about a role that is sometimes shared by a few people in the team? But regardless of how we see that, the work needs to be done. Someone needs to put a backlog together. Someone needs to manage stakeholders. Someone needs to define priorities. Someone needs to provide the progress of the team. Someone needs to organize the team themselves. Someone needs to manage the expectations because some people are unhappy. They woke up and say, hey, now I'm unhappy. I was happy yesterday. I'm unhappy today because God knows what. Someone needs to deal with that. Someone resigns. Someone needs to recruit someone else. Now we are missing a skill in the team. All of that needs to be done in a software project. We need to deploy. We need to monitor in production. We need to make sure there's no bugs. How do we deal with that? Right?
We need to envision the product and test it with users, and do all these things, that talking to users. What is that?
The funny thing is, there is a context to all this as well. There is the actual things that are core that need to happen, and there are other things that happen because of the complexity of the organization. You got the accidental complexity in the organization as well. uh, and you have what you have. Your context is your context. So for example, you can quite easily say, like this situation, for example, where you got a bunch of developers developing the system and a bunch of users using the system, and there is a very tight feedback loop between them, right? And that doesn't, there you can get away with a much smaller core of roles that you need to perform, whether that's the same person or multiple people. And I think we'll get back to that, what Sandra, you were saying. But it could be a much smaller core of roles that need to happen because you got the user next to you, or all the users are in your direct contact, and there is no other context around you. There's not a business stakeholders around you and those kind of things. The reason I'm saying that is actually I'm reading this book, The Cathedral and the Bazaar, at the moment, and this is and it talks about the
Open
cathedral is
source. Yeah.
open source, exactly, and why, for example, something so complex as Linux as a project became such a big success, and arguably only built by developers, right? And all the other kind of really difficult and complicated open source projects, and why are they such a success where people like Microsoft couldn't handle the complexity that Linux has and the reliability it has and all that kind of stuff. But in there, that context is a bunch of developers. They're self-selected, and all these things around. Someone resigns, and some of this. That is because they are self-selected, and they come and go, and those things don't need to happen, right? And because they have this direct contact with the users, and they have the product vision as a collective of the core contributors and so on, it works. But the kind of organizations that we work in, you don't have this context. So the more of the stakeholders, the more machinery, the more the business that sits around you, then all these different roles or different jobs to be done become relevant, right? And when there are lots of jobs to be done, and it's just a big list of these jobs to be done, a developer focusing on the features will miss a lot of them out. And so what we do is we kind of put them in buckets and we make people responsible. And the more there are jobs to be done there are, the more buckets that you're going to need, and the more people you're going to need to be responsible for them. Otherwise you're going to miss all those things out, and they need to be done,
Now, I
right?
think that there is another, like, sorry, Rachel, because you mentioned Linux and the open source code, there is another major difference in here as well. Because like people contribution to open source, quite often they are the users of that open source as well. They are volunteering to build a feature. They say like, look, I don't care about the entire project, but there is this specific thing here that I care a lot about that is not well done or could be improved. So I will do that because either gives me pleasure or I need to use that or whatever. So they have that intrinsic motivation.
There is a
While
user contributor thing, and even the core contributors are users. Yeah,
yeah,
you're
and in a normal project, you are there being paid to do a job, which means that someone expects a return on that investment. So you need to make sure that you are running a business, even sometimes like a business that you might not be so passionate about, or working on areas that are needed for the business, but it's not like something that you would do if you, for example, on your Sunday morning when you woke up. So I mean, like you're paid to do a job. It's a very different thing as well. It's a business that you might not fully understand.
yeah, 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 definitely.
I think there's an aspect as well of, because before you were saying no, there are jobs to be done, and then out of that come the boxes, and you the narrow focus, no, and so on. And I think there's an aspect to economies of scale as well in there, where in order to scale and to find people that are at the speed maybe that you want, you tend to narrow that focus and get people that can do the job. And this is a very tailorist approach, the assembly line, that kind of stuff. You break the thing apart into individual pieces, and then you try to find the guy that pulls the lever, the one that pushes the button, the one, and try to assemble everything just for the sake of scale. No, we're finding someone that is able to go through the whole thing, right? To have that vision, to go from vision all the way to to the delivery, requires a set of skills and a set of knowledge, no, or a body of knowledge that would be harder to get in the market, or more expensive, or maybe you won't
It's
get
frankly
enough.
it's rare. It's rare. It's
Hmm.
not just about harder to get that thing. There's very few people that can pull that off, and you don't get, like, I know Linus has had these issues recently, but these people are they are the absolute exception. They're not the rule. And when we are running so many projects and so many things, and so you can't rely on having these stars that sit within each project. The mere mortals have to build all this software, and and mere mortals can't do everything, right? And it's not just about scale as well. I think it's also about complexity, right? Because when you have so many jobs to be done, like you can say here are all these jobs to be done, and the team, you must do all these jobs. Uh, like if everyone is trying to then see that all those jobs are being done or overseeing them, that's just going to create like an it's an unmanageable situation. And that's why you kind of group them into uh, kind of similar jobs, and you make someone responsible so that there's an area that they can be looking after from the jobs to be done perspective.
There is an expectation as well that every aspect of the job is done well. So, for example, a good part of the job to be done in a software project is figure out what needs to be done and what is the value of what needs to be done. And this can take multiple shapes, from speaking to different stakeholders and aligning them and refining those high level expectations, all the way to sometimes speaking to users and figuring out like what would be the best user journey for them, the best usability for that product, or trying different approach, pushing some stuff out. So there is a lot of skills in doing those A/B testing with users. I'm not talking about technical ones. So not every developer wants to do those jobs, or even if they want to do those jobs, that doesn't mean that they're good at it, because that's a specialization on its own. And sometimes I feel that some people are quite arrogant in thinking that they can do every aspect of the job very well, when first of all it's not true. They don't have the skills. They might be very good at certain areas, but average at best on others. And the project will need professionals in all the areas. And sometimes they're just not interested to do. They say, look, yeah, you know what? We tend to, how can I say, reduce the importance of certain tasks that we don't want to do. And we tend to put a much bigger emphasis on the tasks that we are good at or we really want to do. And this distorts the view of the whole and what kind of roles are needed, right? I think.
Mhm. Yeah. Let's kind of move on. And I think there's a very apt question from Alistair Smith to move on to this other aspect of it, which is around the kind of this context switching aspect as well. Like, not only, as you said, we not only it's about, we will do the things that we are good at and leave the other things behind, regardless of how important they are. But the other thing is that if we are developing the software and then at the same time managing the reports to stakeholders and talking to users and getting the feedback and running it into production and all those kind of things, this requires a lot of context switching. I think this is a very good question. Like, is that a fallacy that it's all to do with developing software, and actually we should be having these context switches so we can have different perspectives onto what we're building, or actually that can slow you down to almost a halt because
I think the where I disagree, or where I would disagree with this, is um, you may not be performing the role, but having the visibility of how everything fits together is necessary in order to do the job properly. Because I think this is one of the reasons why this fragmentation of roles creates dysfunction. Right? You get this silo mentality where people are only looking at their task and they're not looking at the whole, and therefore the whole suffers from that. You may optimize at a specific level, but then the overall is not as good as it could be. And I think this is one of the things that I like a lot about software craftsmanship. You know Pete Mabry or Peter Mabry book,
Green.
no,
Yeah.
Pete Mabry, yeah.
Peter
Um,
McBreen. Okay.
exactly, yeah. So the software craftsmanship in the new period, that's one of the things that he mentions. No, it's like, hey, listen, yeah, the metaphor of the engineer is one thing, and it creates these issues. We need something else that has that holistic view of how the whole process works, how everything fits together, and you are, as a contributor, you are also attached to the work, so to speak, like an artisan, no? And I feel like that's something that is lost. And whether you have a specialty and you decide that, I'm only going to write code, or I'm only going to be really good at product imagining or whatever, right? Sorry about the cat. You still have a visibility of how everything works, and you understand how your work fits with all of the other stuff that needs to get done, right?
I think
And this
I,
is the part that you're able also at certain points to put on different hats, right? Like, it doesn't mean that you're always going to be putting every single hat. No, that's what I meant. And before, when we were talking, I it came to mind, I follow a lot of indie game developers and that kind of stuff, and these are usually people who work, for years on their own, or maybe one or two people, yeah, on monumental tasks, because this is, they do design, they do the graphics, they do, the sound effects, they do like the programming, the AI, they have to go through lots of different fields in order to get something that is really good. And they may not be really good at it, no, they may not be specialists, but the end result is really good, right? Like, they because they have that whole visibility,
well,
right?
I think there is a balance there, isn't it, between awareness and having to do everything, right? You may want to do so, like you will have overlaps, and you may even plug in the gap when there is a gap, or there is more work, and you may want to balance that out, because you can do it not as good as the expert, but you can do it. But awareness is the most important thing, that you need to have a very close awareness that all this happens. Sorry, Sandra, you were gonna.
No, I was just saying. So there are quite a few interesting comments on the chat, and so for instance, there is something about, like, a few people mentioned about speaking to users and stuff, or speaking to other people, and even like I think it was German that mentioned that he refused that tech leadership so that he could focus more on coding instead of talking to other people and stuff. Because, like, there is no doubt, some roles you can focus in one thing. And by the way, I just want to make sure that there is nothing wrong in people's preferences, right? So some people want to specialize, they want to do one job very well. They say, look, yeah, I care about the whole, but I really want to focus. I want you to get the information that I need so that I can focus on my task. And there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, that it's your personal choice, and this might create some either some advantages or disadvantages in your career progression, depending on what you want, right? So, and also might impact the value that you provide for the
The team.
person paying you.
Yeah, you can
But
put
also,
yeah, that kind of specialization, then you kind of fit in a very tayloristic thing. You have to be part of a larger machine, and you are going to be very good at that, but only that, and not the holistic, right?
yeah, exactly. And if the companies, they need that high degree of specialization, and that is very valuable to the company, that's okay. But that's a personal choice. So what I'm just trying to say here, I don't want anyone listening to this feel that there is a right or wrong in your personal choices. We're talking more about general ways. So, but I've seen this case about developers rejecting leadership positions many times, including inside Codurance, where people said, look, I don't want to be a tech lead, or I don't want to take this engagement manager role or whatever, because I want to focus on code. And there is nothing wrong with that. However, your value is now in that segment. While that segment is valuable, you have, but it's more limited. Like, so your certain roles, you need to speak to people, and certain roles, they enable other people to work. So you are almost like a multiplier, right? So your work allows multiple people to work well instead of just focusing on a single individual work. But there are merits to both. So, regardless of personal preferences, certain roles needs to be done, right? So, and I think that the one that manages users, and users, you don't have just end users. This is another comment in there, I think, from Javier Chacana. Yes, we need to speak to users, but there are multiple types of users and they bring many different challenges. So there is the end users themselves to say, hey, what would you like to have as a feature in our product? Anyone can ask that question, but there is an art for product people or user experience people to really understand what they really need. And different users will answer different things. They might want completely different things, like all of us. We might want to do things in a completely different way. We look at the screen, and like if you put like a bunch of wireframes to achieve a job, different ways to achieve the same job, different people will pick different options. So someone needs to resolve that or figure out like what are the different needs and stuff. This is a skill on its own. It's not just I want to speak to the users, but you need to have certain skills to make sense of those answers, know what to ask, and then feed that to the development process. Also, different approaches might have different costs. Hey, if we take this approach in here to implement that, we might need this amount of people, this cost, and so on and so forth. If we do a different approach, might be a different cost, a different number of people, a different release date, and so on. Someone needs to have that conversation. Someone needs to talk to all those people, make those decisions. Those are all work that needs to be done, right? So there is a question also from, I forgot now, from Marabesi or someone else saying, where does the consultant comes in? Is there a role for the consultant? It depends on how you talk about purely, I am the consultant that you come in to consult, or the consultancy skills. And that for me, everyone should have. In a project, you need to consult, you need to speak to people and understand what they need, how you can coordinate that work. Hey, if you need that and you need that and I need to do that and this is your skill, this is my skill. So that ability to make a group of people work together and make sure that it's value to everyone is for me part of consulting skills. So there is, I will stop speaking
No,
here.
no, no. I was gonna say that, answered like a true consultant. It depends. No. Are you
So
talking about the consultancy skill, or are you talking about the role of the consultant? No?
by the way, I'd like to just go back a little around what you said, Sandro, around exercising a personal choice to only do a narrow thing. It depends on what we mean by that. Because if that leads to an attitude that certain things need to get done, that you might be able to do okay, right? Like if, for example, I'm a developer, I'm a backend engineer, I specialize in backend development, and suddenly there's not a lot to do with backend development in the team. There's a lot of front end work, and this is I've seen it. I'm a backend engineer. I don't do front end. I think there is something very wrong with that.
No, so I would say I was just trying to be diplomatic, but now I'm going to be more specific.
Now you're
Everyone,
gonna make friends.
now I'm going to be diplomatic. So no, this is for me, like not only for me, this is in general. This is how I think. I think that individuals should do whatever they feel that is right for them. They can control what how they behave. What they cannot control is how people are going to react to that. So everyone is entitled to say, this is how I want to lead my career. This is what I want to do moving forward. That doesn't mean that the people paying for that work will find it valuable, or find that is a good attitude, or find that is suitable moving forward in that company. It was before, now it's not anymore. So individuals should do whatever they want, but other people that are paying for that service, they will react according to the value that they perceive on those actions. That's what I
I
would say.
see. But there are like giving advice to people as well. I mean, in this scenario, I think that there are certain behaviors that are frankly they're not professional. right? The way that, and Jose talked about the kind of the craftsmanship mindset as well, right? We are there to build software and build it well. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done under it. A lot of it is coding, but there's a lot of other stuff around it, right? And of course we may not have those skills to do it, but taking the attitude that that is not my job, I think it very much flies against the whole kind of team ownership aspect of it, right? So I personally think that even if you can't do it, you should make an attempt. If for example you're a backend developer, you've never even seen JavaScript or HTML or whatever, but that's what needs to be done, you go and sit with them and learn to do it, because that is what being in a team means. That is what being a professional means. You do what needs to be done in order to achieve the goals for the team, right? And with that also comes they talk about this generalizing specialist. I think the whole idea of I am just a specialist and I don't want to generalize in anything is also the wrong attitude. You
Uh,
should be
I,
looking at
I
all these
agree.
things to generalize.
No, I agree. As I said, like I was just trying, like for example, there are what people want to do. That is how what they do is perceived. They should have the freedom to do.
Hmm.
Then someone decides if they see value on that or not. So they cannot
Hmm.
control that. Each one controls its own side. But then there is the craftsmanship spirit. That is a different story. That's how we base our lives, and
Mama Sufyan just wrote extreme ownership.
that's my thing. Yeah. So exactly. So I feel like this is an interesting thing that it always puzzles me when people reject um, opportunities to lead or to participate in certain tasks, because like I I normally when like I led my career in a way that I wanted to have autonomy. I wanted to have more control of my actions. But saying that something is not my job or not volunteering to get involved in certain key aspects of a project would go against having autonomy, would go against me being controlling decision making. So being part of the decision. Because as soon as I reject work, when I isolate myself, all those other things that we are talking about, they still need to be done. Someone still needs to make a decision, and most of those decisions will impact me anyway. So I normally would say, beyond me giving more value to whoever is paying for my service, I would be contributing to shape the my own future, my own work, right? So I would be providing more value and have more autonomy.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
You know,
No.
going, I think it was Helder de Oliveira is somewhere in the chat, and he before he was using the metaphor of the football team, and I think this is a lack of understanding of what your job is. And the best way that I've seen this described is if you ask, I don't know, the goalie what his job is. Most people will tell you, well, make sure that the ball doesn't go into this thing, right? Like prevent the other team from getting the ball in, right? And so from scoring, yeah. If you ask, a frontliner, no, what your job is, like, well, probably my job is to make sure that I score on the other team. But and then you can maximize that, so to speak. No, like the more goals I put in, or the more goals I prevent, no, I'm doing my job better, right? But you can win the game, yeah, uh, scoring one goal, yeah, or you can lose the game scoring the 10 goals, right?
Yeah.
Uh, because the purpose is not so much what you do, is how it affects the whole. The your job is to win the game, and everyone is playing a different position, right? So that's the idea. I think that's, again, going back to the systemic point of view and understanding how everything works. I think that is part of what is lacking there, is how you see your job is not just your job, or what you do, is what you do and how it affects everything else, no, the
Yeah.
end outcome that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And that's quite I think powerful when you understand that that's your job and not just the code that you're writing. Then it opens up a lot of opportunities in that sense. No.
So, sorry, let's move the conversation on, because I think we've discussed a lot this area, but there's a few questions. There's a recent question as well, around, what are the six core roles and how you define them, because I think there's quite a lot of value in us going there. It's like, what are the, like, okay, let's say that roles are necessary, right? And especially in the kind of situations we find ourselves in, what are the core roles that we must always have? Without them, we don't really have a team. And what are the others that actually are more applicable in a context?
Yeah. You know that I have seen like some people that are reasonably famous in the industry saying something so ridiculous that I could not even, I didn't even bother to reply. But the guy was saying, uh, like no those hashtags, no projects, no SQL, no this, no that, and blah blah. There was one that was no developers, and I understand where they were coming from, but it was so absurd. Because for me, like when you talk about core roles, you cannot have a software project without developers, period. Right? But now what gets interesting is how much we stretch the developer. And I think we discussed that in a previous episode quite a while back. We talked about neighboring disciplines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So uh, normally the developer is the one that is expected to stretch out and do far more roles than others. We don't ask product people to write code. We don't ask BAs to write code. We don't ask other people to write code, but we expect the developer to do a bit of all of those things, right? So the developers should certainly be there. And the more versatile the developers are, the fewer roles you might need. But the more narrow focus the developer is, the more roles you need. Well, roles is might not be the roles are always there, but the how many people you have is a different story. I think that you need the developers. I think that regardless of the project, technical or not, like being business features or a modernization project, you need the role. What in Agile we call them a product owner. It might not be fit, the word product might not be suitable for all sorts of projects, but you need someone that owns the product, the direction, the vision, what needs to be done, in which order, how the work is going to, that role needs to exist. I don't feel that a group of people, a group of developers alone can make those decisions. And I normally, if the environment of stakeholders is too complex, or there is a lot to do in terms of analysis or user experience and stuff, the developers will come short. So the role of someone that really provides that direction, I think that is a core role in my view. The role of quality assurance is a core role for me. Again, if you're going to have a specific person playing the QA or the tester, or if that will be shared by the team, that's a slightly different discussion, but quality assurance is certainly a core role for me. So those three, the developers, the product, and the quality assurance are for me core roles. Everything else, it might vary according to if you describe the context, I might add or change a few rows, but those three for me, I think that would make the core roles.
Like, speaking of the developer and product owner, there's a very interesting comment by Mohammed Sufyan around, my idea is driven by hypothesis that features to develop should go from top to bottom, or should it be bi-directional? This is a very interesting thing, and you can talk about the role of the product owner or product manager in some cases around this as well, right? Is that I guess what Mohammed Sufyan is trying to say is that the vision for what we are building should come as much from the developers, kind of bottom up, as it comes from the users and the product owner top down, right?
There is a difference here. One is a collab. I think that we need to distinguish. I understand the sentiment behind the question, but there is, I think we also discussed that in a previous episode, that is the autonomy to make decisions, the spheres of autonomy. So in my view, anyone in a software project should be able to suggest uh, what needs to be done, because people will look at the system in different ways. So yes, so part of the question, I would agree 100%. Developers should be saying to the product, to business, and say, hey, we need to work on those things. Otherwise, the system is going to fall apart. Those are things we need to do to support something else. But so the suggestions for the work to be done, anyone should be free to provide that. But there will be one person or maybe a small group of people that will actually make the decision and say, okay, now that I understand everything and the value, that is still like just a few people. Not everyone can say, one thing is to suggest, another thing is to say, I'm going to work on these. I'm going to define the priorities. And those are two separate conversations for me.
I think the bottom up approach also is applicable when you have a very tight feedback cycles and value is very clear, and you're kind of taking the next step forward to understand what value that brings. And there's that kind of experimental approach to it as well. And in those cases, it's very very true that like core contributors, like even in open source world, they are the product owners, and they have the product vision, and they're also building the software, and they are obviously listening to other people, but that creates a very nice dynamic. But it's not always possible, or people don't have that wider context in a lot of cases, because they're often too far away from the user, or the organization itself is so complex that they can't have that. You can't. And again, it's all this accidental complexity that is within the organization. I'm kind of trying to move things on a bit, because I think there's a lot of things to discuss. There's another interesting question to talk about, which is from Emmanuel. It says, I would say UX UI should be core as well. um I think that's an interesting question to ask, like core, but in what context? Like suddenly
Exactly.
things start becoming contextual, right? Because
Yeah, it's a breakdown of, you could see it as a breakdown of the product kind of side of things, no, where it's focusing on the visual representation, or the interactions, or the way that the product itself manifests and people interact with it. But product, for me, includes a lot of other stuff that is not just the visual aspect or the interaction aspect, right? Like there's business behind it. There's a lot of you know other things in there as well, right? So
Yeah,
so
we
yeah,
have, for
it
example,
depends, no?
yeah, we have like projects in software modernization, and we've been working with this client for 3 years now. All the work was hardcore backend improvements and stuff. There was not a single thing that we've done that was client facing or that involved any product or user experience or even user interface. Although we made a few changes on the user interface, but it was more on the architectural side than actually things. So yes, UX UI would be core in a specific kind of project where you are developing products for the end users, iterating over a lot of features and trying out different approach for the product. In that context, yes, but not in others.
Mhm. And let's go back to one, Cassandra. You mentioned QA, quality assurance, as a core function, but I think
Mhm.
you'll get as many answers in terms of what that role means as as you would ask people. How would you define the role of a QA?
Aha. So this is probably like we should dedicate a full episode on quality assurance. For people listening to us, like we had a lot of internal discussions about QA. And we were even, because like we wanted to say like we want to hire QAs, but like then we had to define what does QA even mean. And a lot of people conflate the idea of quality assurance with tests, or someone named QA as a tester. And at least in our definition, when we discuss this internally, quality assurance is the entire thing. You are looking at the overall quality of the project, of the whole process, from inception, ideas, all the way to software in production. It's not only about testing some piece of code that a developer wrote. This is a very
or automating, which is another thing
Yeah,
that people also do.
exactly
they even start calling it test automation engineer just to kind of,
distinguished.
differentiate. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So for us, like there is the tester or the test automator, but there is quality assurance. And for me, quality assurance is the quality of the whole process, all the way to the features being used and stuff like that. So for me, this kind of professional is almost impossible to find. Someone that has this overall view of quality, right? Because there are so many aspects to it. There is the process, the business, the development, and so on and so forth. So what led us to think that the overall quality assurance needs to be shared across everyone. And then you might have some people that are specialized when it comes to quality of code and design. That needs to be done by the developers.
Mhm.
When it comes to the test automation or verifying, checking if the system, there's no bugs, there's no regression and stuff, yes, there are specialized testers that can do a good job, both manually or exploratory, as we prefer to call it, or through automation, which normally automation I prefer to be done by the proper developers. But anyway, um, but then there is the quality of the process itself, right? The quality of the features that are being released, the quality perceived by the end user. So this is a different type of quality. So, but that's why I said quality assurance is for me a core discipline that quite often is shared across everyone in the
Yeah.
project. Everyone should be looking after
It's
quality.
yeah, it's generally, and if you do have a quality assurance person, what they're doing is they're like the force kind of multiplier. They're making sure that the whole team is adopting
It's
the right
working
practice.
as a unit. It's working as a unit when it comes
Yeah. So
to
they,
to
yeah, so they
uh,
themselves are not assuring quality, but rather putting the culture, the practices, and all those things in place so that the whole team is looking after the quality, um, from end to end, right?
Yeah,
The other question that's been asked quite a bit is around the product owner and product managers, and we also have to get to delivery manager because that's also quite a common role that we see. But let's talk about the product owners and product managers. First of all, what's the difference?
Jose, you go for this one.
I knew you'd moved on that on to Jose.
uh, it really depends on the organization, because I have seen
It
product owners that
depends.
are
It
no.
I
depends.
don't know.
This is no. It depends on the organization, because I've seen product owners behave like product managers. So they look after the product, where the product is going, vision, etc., right? Whereas the product owner as a label is something that comes from Scrum, right? Which has a specific, backlog management, blah blah blah. There's a set of responsibilities that are, the that go with the role. And this is the part where I, again, depends on the organization, because people attach a meaning to the label, right? So if you ask me, like, in order to separate them, for me, product owner will be someone who's, let's say, performs the responsibilities within the Scrum framework, around product backlog, being a central point for, decision making and prioritization for basically what comes up next, no, or what's going to be built next, and so on. And a product manager would work a bit of a higher level, wouldn't get that much involved with the day to day of that backlog in particular, right? Like, it will be more on the product side, strategy side for the product, and less on the day to day what feature needs to be built, right? So that's how I see those two. But again, that's my perception. Again, I've seen product owners or chief product owners. No, this is another title that no, that comes up. take on that responsibility or be the product owner of the product owners, right? That kind of stuff. Um, so
I've,
yeah, for
I've,
me,
I've seen
it's a bit different.
I've, I've seen product manager. I think product manager is the really vague one. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen product managers tactical and product managers who are considered strategic, kind of from a strategic point of view, above the product owners, even, right? Like kind of
Mm-hmm.
product owners or product. I've seen them both, and and I don't know at what point we started coming up with product managers, kind of that title, right? To some aspect, it was, yeah, like the first time I joined a very big team, and they'd just gone through an agile transformation, and the product owner introduced himself. He said, well, I used to be the manager, i.e. the boss of this team, and now they call me the product owner, but they know who's the boss. I am still the manager. And part of me thinks, like, of course we've tried to, maybe we've tried to kind of meld or combine, rather, the delivery manager aspect and the product owner aspect to then a product manager, someone who is not only has the vision for the product and does all those, scrum related kind of activities that are associated with the product owner, but is also the delivery manager, right? All around delivery and stakeholder management and all, kind of deadlines and program and project and all that kind of stuff. So it's one of those things that, like, every time you see a product manager role, it's specific to the team. You have to ask the person and the team on what that means and have it very well clarified, because I don't think there is one definition for a product
Yeah.
manager.
There are two questions related, or comments and questions. For one, for Emmanuel, saying, should the PO or PM have technical knowledge, as we should have it, of the business? So basically, the developers need to understand the business, but should they understand tech? And also, Mohammed also mentioned, what was it? That's a broader question. What should be the profile of a product owner, engineering manager, and so on and so forth? So, um, it depends. So I think that
and I'm being accused in the chat that to be no, that's my default answer. I think
yeah.
it's a default
So
answer for any consultant.
yeah.
Just say I don't know, but you're not allowed
Exactly.
to say that.
Well, it
No,
depends.
never. I don't know. A consultant never says I don't know. It's always it depends. But the thing is, when you have like the reason I'm saying that, because there are some projects we have, for example, in intern, like at Codurance, we have product development as one type of projects, and we have, like, for example, software modernization. And those two projects are, although there are, most of course have some overlap, but if I take them to extreme, they are significantly different. So a product owner or a project manager in a product development project that is very product oriented, I have a preference that this person has a good vision of the product, can really explain what the business behind, and they understand enough technology so that when we explain to them, look, those are the issues that we need to tackle, they have enough knowledge to understand that. I think, yes, answering one of those questions, they should have a small overlap. We need to understand the business, but if they are in a software project, they are building a software product. My personal view, if I had to choose one product owner or project manager, or whatever you call them, they would need to understand the business as the core discipline, but they need to understand at least a little bit of the tech, because otherwise they cannot speak the same language. They cannot. It will be a struggle for us to talk about the technical difficulties in building that.
I don't know,
On
Sandro.
the
I
but the
disagree.
core focus,
I disagree.
unless, no, sorry, I'm saying, like, what would be my ideal?
Hmm.
What would be my ideal? But if they don't have the technical knowledge, and I worked for people with both, people that were highly technical and people that had no technology background at all. I normally struggled with the one with no technology background. The only time that I didn't struggle is when they relied on us. They were, hey, I don't understand tech. I need this to be done, and I need to rely on you to tell me what is possible, what is not possible. But then it needs to be clear where the knowledge ends. And then you need to trust. So if I say that I don't understand product, I need to trust the product owner. And the same thing, if they say I don't understand tech, they need to trust me, because otherwise we cannot have a healthy relationship. However, if you are talking about a software modernization project, the product owner in there, or the person playing that role, defining the priorities and stuff, needs to be a technical person, because it's a technical project. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for that person to do their job.
Yeah, I think software modernization is a very a specific case where you do where the product actually its vision, it's not really a product, it's more a project in that case,
But
right?
there
It's
are products mesh. There are technical products, and there are normal end users, clients, like for example, people buying stuff online, where their customer is someone like my mom. But there
but
are products. There are
yeah,
technical products.
even technical products is there's someone mentioned the idea of a domain expert. In both cases, a product owner is a kind of a domain expert, and at the very least understands the needs of the user, whether that's a technical user or a general public user, right? So there is a domain expertise element in the product owner, and if of course if that domain is highly technical and it's all about the technical, then they need to be technical, they need to have that domain expertise. But there are certain kind of skills and behaviors and activities of a product owner that I think are quite um you
And
know
in any case, they need to be great communicators. And this is the part where I, kind of disagree. Like, oh, I struggle because we didn't see. They need to be great communicators, and if they're leading a team, they need to be great leaders as well. And part
yeah,
of that is understanding. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I need to trust the team and try to find that balance, right?
yeah,
Where the other thing that you were mentioning, it seemed like someone who didn't have any clue was trying to tell you exactly what to do, or micromanage, or so on. And yeah, it's I agree with that definition. No, like it's a domain expert, and as part of that, if the domain in which the product is working is very technical, they need to know technology
Yeah,
quite well.
but I'll tell you what. Like, I think I'll be a bit more assertive in here, because I've been thinking. Here is like what would be our ideal profile. It's not like what would potentially work. So for me, if I had to choose, if someone is a product owner on a software product, in my view, they need to understand how software is made, because the chances of that relationship being healthy when they don't understand how software is made is extremely small. It will really rely on certain very exceptional individuals that can make that work, but on average, that relationship will not be
Okay,
healthy.
but
So,
understanding how software is made is one thing, and being a technical
no, certainly,
person
but
is
for
is a
example,
different thing, right?
but,
Like I
but,
would
but,
understand for them to no.
but see, for example, if I want to build cars, like my product's a car, I need to understand how a car works. I cannot just say I'm going to be a product owner for a car if I don't have a clue how the
and
mechanics
yeah,
work.
I think what Jose is trying to say is that, like, I need to understand how a car works, but it's more a general understanding. So for
Sure,
example,
Exactly.
I
of
know that it
course.
has
It
an
has an
engine.
engine,
Yeah,
But for
combustion,
example,
etc.,
but if
etc.
the
Right?
mechanics come in, if the mechanics come in and say, hey, we need this kind of thing or this machine or whatever, they need to understand that vocabulary. They need to understand what the common problems are. Because, like, yes, they don't need to write code. They don't need to understand AWS or Bash scripts or God knows what. But they need to understand the work that is done by other people. The same way that developers need to understand the business, the same way that developers are pushed to understand the neighboring disciplines, the software development is a neighboring discipline for a product owner, because it's essential.
I
Otherwise,
think they need
we
to have a
probably
good
would have
awareness.
that.
They need to have a good awareness of it. Like, they can't just like when they, even when, or at least have a curiosity towards it, because they can't just say, oh, as soon as you start talking about software or this module or that,
Yeah, blah, blah,
nah,
blah, blah,
I
blah,
don't,
blah.
I'm not interested. That they can't. And I think, you're both talking about the same thing, really, that the communications is an important thing. And in order to create good level of communication, when people are speaking from kind of different perspectives, they need to come at a meeting point, which where basically means that their knowledge blurs into each other's domains, right? So of course that's needed. But yeah, I think it's understood on both sides that a product owner does not need to be a programmer, or does
Yeah,
not even
Mm,
have to come from a programming discipline,
no.
yeah.
even for technical projects, because as long as they understand the needs, and they understand that domain, and then they apply their own skills. In fact, Emmanuel asked me directly that question. But developers are also domain experts, and that's also our part too. And yes, of course, it's that's what I'm talking. Even in product owners, the actual skill of being a product owner is a specific kind of skills. They have domain expertise like others will have. They will have a different perspective on the domain. A developer has another perspective on the domain, and they're not necessarily the same perspective.
Mhm.
There's an aspect of roles that I think we haven't discussed, which is the minute that you set the label on someone and you assign it to a person, that already creates a bit of an issue. I mean, it doesn't always have to do that, but the QA is a great example of that. No, like you're the QA, then people immediately think I don't need to test, right? Or I don't need to take care of making sure that this works the way that it's supposed to work, because if it's not going to work, then the QA will
That's
catch it,
what will tell
right?
me.
And you kind of exactly you're gonna kind of delegate that responsibility, or move that responsibility to the person holding the role, which is something that goes against what you were trying to achieve, no? And I think it's the same in this case, when we're talking about the product owner or the product or the domain expert, no, or the BA, or no, it's that thing where the minute that you add the label, you're kind of pointing at someone that can become really quickly a silo, either because you're shifting the burden towards that, no, or because the person is then removing agency from other people, because this is another thing that some people start seeing you as, no, you're the QA, no, and you need to do this. But if you're a scrum master, no, and you're like, well, I take care of the board, I facilitate the meetings, you start doing all of these things that take away from that over, overlap, no, that you want to have and is healthy to have. And it's a very humane kind of thing, no, it's a the labels, you identify with the label. When you assign a label, you're creating two groups: the ones who are, and the ones who are not. No, you're creating that boundary the minute that you add the label.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So
So
there is something that Frank Torres. Frank, I don't know exactly when you joined. We discussed your last point about QA being a shared responsibility a little bit earlier, but you asked a different question before. You asked like, how many have you managed the option of teams owning the product? And someone else mentioned that earlier on as well. That so I think that it depends, of course, but I think that how you define team is important here, because the answer will be different. If you are defining the team as just developers, my answer will be one. If you are defining the team as a group of people that can cover all the aspects that we discussed, understanding what the priorities, liaising with stakeholders, thinking about the business value, looking at overall quality. So if we are talking about a group of people that can do the full work, yes, that's normally how it works. They own the product. But if you're just talking about developers owning the product, I haven't seen that working.
yeah, Alistair has asked this question as well. Does this not all return to the ideal team being one that is focused on the end goal above all else? All individuals share a common intent to deliver the product. The labels are relatively irrelevant. And I think, Yes, the way I would answer that, yes, like as Jose said as well, you might be a goalkeeper, you might be a striker, your actual goal is the goal of the team, which is to win the game, right? And that's but having said that, I don't personally don't think the roles are irrelevant, although they should play second fiddle to the goal itself, right? So they are there to help you achieve the goal and to help you organize in a better way. And
Provide clarity. They're
provide
there to provide clarity, because this is the thing. The lack of roles is also something that works against you achieving
the end
the
goal.
goal that you want. And I think this is also part of what people learn. Like when you're starting a project, when you're starting a team, etc., having that conversation about how you're going to split those responsibilities or jobs that need to be done, no,
Mhm,
is important as well, right?
mhm,
Because it sends a message to everyone else. Okay, so these are the things that we are expecting you to take care of, and like how we're gonna reduce the amount of rework that we're doing, or the duplication, or the like all of these things that in the end they work against what you're trying to achieve as well.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
I think that, yeah,
we
one thing that
need to
we
start
also,
wrapping up a bit as well, guys,
yeah,
because we're
so
way
just like
above time.
the last point that I want to make is that there is in some of those questions and comments, there is an assumption here that everyone in, like, for example, to have a self-organizing team that does everything, plays like a football team, as the metaphor was used a few times in there. There is an assumption in here that all those people, they share this desire to satisfy the goal of the client and stuff, right? And they all feel part of the team. They all have this purpose, common purpose in mind. Reality is a little bit different from that. We are talking about individuals with completely different preferences, different career aspirations. That some people will say, hey, I want to learn this. And if this project is not about this, I'm not happy. Or I want to do this kind of work. If it's to do that kind of work, I can do it. But if I do it for too long, I will be unhappy. So we are the premise that everyone is behind the goal and they will do equally whatever it takes to satisfy the goal is normally false. And because this is true, and then people end up saying, hey, I don't want to be in this project, or they change jobs, they find another job that is more aligned. Because we are dealing with people with different aspirations, this is why sometimes it's important. For example, even when they are aligned, like they are have a common goal, they might have different say, hey, we want to achieve the same goal, but we want to achieve that goal in different ways. We agree in the end result, but the way that we get there, we will fight until death. Because I think that my way is better than yours. And if you do yours, it will be a disaster and we are not going to get to the end goal. So someone needs to resolve that as well. And some people don't do a good job in doing certain things. So this is the premise. That's why sometimes having more well-defined roles and even having some management across a team or across teams is important, because we are not just saying, oh, they are all football players where they're best, they want to win the game, and that's the only thing that they have in their mind. This is not true.
Good point. Any other comments from you, Jose?
No, I think we can start wrapping up.
Sounds good. So, any final thoughts?
No, I think the only thing that I want to leave probably is that there are roles and there are individual performing roles. Quite often, like some very special individuals, they can perform multiple roles and quite well across different roles. So regardless if you have one person dedicated to each role or not, that work needs to be done. And I think that the message that I leave is like, never reject responsibility. That's what I've done for my entire career. I don't reject an opportunity to be involved in something or shape something. I would always like to be part of the decision making instead of just waiting for someone to tell me what to do and then complain about that. So that's food for thought.
Cool.
Yeah, I guess my thought would be more on, you need to understand what those jobs to be done are, like what is it that is needed in order for the project to be successful. And I would say that independently of your role, if you see that something is not happening and is necessary, you should act on that. No, it's a bit like take the initiative and be proactive, and find a way, no, to make sure that that is being handled either by you or by someone else. No, if you really want the thing to be successful. But you need to understand how everything else works. Stay curious, no, about what others are bringing into the picture, what and how that helps not only make your work better, but how you can make other people's work better. No?
And yeah, and have a healthy respect for all the other
Yeah,
roles. Once
exactly,
you
exactly.
respect them, you that engenders curiosity. And the final thing, I think Alistair said it as well, right? At the end of the day, we are there to achieve a goal, and we work on your strengths to achieve it. But if your strengths is not what's needed at the moment, then work on the other thing as well. Cool.
And
All
I
right.
would like to thank everyone on the chat. Like you really make those conversations far more enjoyable. Like having your comments, your questions really makes this a much better experience for us as well. So
Yeah,
thank you all.
brilliant. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Take care.